Thank you, Ron, and happy St. Patrick's Day to all of our Native American friends. On the big map, where's my map? There's no map. It's just green.
No, there's a map there. Look at the monitor.
Right?
Oh, God. Ron, where's my legs? Where are my legs?
Your legs are there.
I don't have any legs, Ron. I don't even know how I'm standing up.
No. Brick, your legs are fine. The color of your pants just matches the
Ron, I don't have any legs.
the chroma key behind you.
In 93! 93!
Relax.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another week of Muskies on Tap. Welcome to episode number 103. I am one of your three hosts on here tonight, Gus Manty. Excited to bring you another week of Muskies on Tap. Let's see what we got on tap here tonight. We got a special guest who we're going to have on shortly. I'm sure you already saw it in the title. Mr. JVR is popping on, giving a little Northwoods update. We're recording this before we have him on, so we'll see what we talk about. Pretty pumped to talk some Muskies, finally coming close to the Northwoods. But before we get any further, let's introduce the other Mott members, Mott hosts on here tonight. We got none other than my brother Max, who just came off a recent birthday on what we call Cinco de Maxo. How was that? How you feeling, Max? Young? Old?
Feeling great. Feeling fantastic, fellas. It is a great time of year. Personal favorite month of mine. We got NHL playoffs going on. We got NBA playoffs going on. We got major season in golf. We got Northern Wisconsin opener coming up. We just had the Southern Wisconsin opener, which we decided to not participate in this year, coming off of our lackluster performance there last year. I think it was good to take a gap year on that Southern opener, but
Agreed.
I hope everyone that went down there and or got out on the lake here this past weekend crushed some fish. But yeah, man, just a great time of year. Sun's out, weather's looking good. So yeah, without further ado, and thank you very much for the birthday well wishes there on the Muskies on Tap Instagram post. Didn't know
Yeah,
that
dog.
picture
I
existed.
took your best pick I could find.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Brian.
Right.
The voice you just heard there is none other than our third co-host. Looks like he's sipping on something here this evening, so don't be surprised if you're gonna get some scalding hot takes out of that camp
Sloppy
tonight.
takes.
And that is none other than Mr. Brian Eckel. Brian, how we doing this evening?
I'm doing great. And for everybody wondering what I'm sipping on, it is something new to me. I just saw it when I was in the grocery store, figured I'd try it out.
Well, treat.
A little treat, definitely a little treat. It's called a Sun
Branching out.
Cruiser iced tea vodka. I'm not even sure like if one of the bigger alcohol companies owns this thing or not, but yeah, Sun Cruiser, pretty damn smooth. You could have 13, 14 before you even know it hits you. But yeah, Max, I
Sure.
mean, I agree. May is a very underrated month. You started laying it all out there for us. Major golf coming up again, couple weeks out, and weather on the upswing. I just saw out in your neck of the woods, Minneapolis, 90 some degrees this weekend, which is
Yeah,
absolutely ridiculous.
it's porch beer drinking weather here on the horizon. So I am pretty excited. Probably gonna hit some patios this weekend. I'm headed to a Twins
Let's
game
go.
Friday night. I got a tea
Oh,
time slotted for Saturday afternoon. I mean,
oh,
you just can't make this stuff up, man. The vibes are high. We're
you are
feeling good,
living it.
That's
This is
amazing.
31. This is 31 here, gentlemen. This is what you got to look forward to.
It doesn't seem much
Year's
different
young.
than 26.
Yeah, before we get into the serious stuff, we actually are going to do a little conversation, if you will, on the Eagle Lake what you call it, a flyer, a little PSA that Eagle Lake had put out, and
Yeah.
some of the guys up in that area. But before we get into that, you talk about weather, Brian, and we've been breaking this down in the chats this week. We wanted to introduce you guys
Weather
to a little
watch.
thing we call Weathy Watch or Weather Watch.
Oh yeah.
Some
The
knows.
pre-
It's
So,
a big thing in our chat.
big thing in the chat.
The
Starts anywhere
premature early season,
premature
early
weather
access.
Yeah,
I mean, we
so-
talk about ice off weather watch about a month in advance of actual ice off. We probably were talking about opener plans and weather possibly in January. So our weather watch starts
Yeah.
anywhere from 14 to 150 days out. So
Oh, let me break this. Let me break this down for y'all. I know you guys got the group chats probably already humming for Northern Wisconsin opener. You know, you got your boys, got the weekend plan. So let me break down a
and
little weather
gals.
watch on how we're doing it here on Muskies on Tap. So when you're outside of 14 days out, so anywhere, 15 plus days, you typically
Trending.
you take the announcement and you say, "Hey, we are up until 14 days out from actual weather watch." That's where, you get the 14-day extended forecast that
That's Weddy
typically
Wash.
on the back end of it, that's the real weather watch, but you read pretty much always that weather never ends up coming true anyways, but it's just good to see it. So you got to
Yeah.
make the
Yeah.
announcement that weather watch is coming up, and then the 14-day hits, you release the 14-day forecast to the group. You guys talk about it. And
hmm
then true
hmm
weather watch is when the 10-day comes out.
Yep.
We're starting to hone in a little bit. Usually then, maybe things
Gotcha.
are kind of getting a clearer picture.
And mind you,
And
this is all like lighthearted, kind of joking, ultra optimistic, and then like the fucking 3 to 5 day weather watch drops,
then
and
you
then
lock
it's,
in.
but then you're
And you're
locked
just like,
in, but
oh shit.
it might be a nightmare.
It might be a nightmare. And it always starts out way more optimistic because it's like if the weather watch looks bad, you're like, oh, there's no way it'll be bad because we got 14 days for that to turn around. If it looks good, you're pretty much saying that's for sure going to be the weather. And then you're
hmm
typically disappointed leading up to it. So
We
just
already
wanted to
made the
give you guys
joke
that.
today. It's like, oh, it's trending, in the 70s. Yeah, see, in the next 2 weeks, as far as we can see. And our buddy Grape Wake, shout out. He's like, it's
I know.
perfect. It'll be 70
Shut
leading up,
up.
and then it'll be 48 degrees come opener weekend. So
That's what's
like
calling for.
that's definitely happened in the past, but stay
100%.
optimistic.
100%. Um, all right, guys, I'm going to turn it over to you here to kick off this chat, but I just want to set the stage. So, a little bit of a bomb drop, I guess, if you will, circulated the socials the past couple weeks. We haven't had the chance to talk about it. Everybody really is, because I think it's probably the first piece of literature now, kind of a stance, if you will, that was permeated throughout the fishing industry. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so it's titled "Protect the Tradition, Preserve the Challenge." I think that in itself is kind of explanatory for what this is because it's not a regulation, it's not a law, it's more of a suggestion flyer. Really, the main points of contention here were use of forward-facing sonar responsibly, avoid sharpshooting, road hunting, or spotlighting. And probably a fringe argument there is respect depth limits, but I think mostly here it's actually calling out the use of limiting your live scope usage when you go up to Eagle Lake. So want to set the stage and turn it over to you guys and what you guys think about this flyer.
Yeah, this
Right.
is
Yeah.
interesting. Real quick, there's like a Muskie 360 article on it. A bunch of groups involved to come out with this publication flyer. Eagle Lake Conservation Group, Eagle Lake Resorts, local businesses, and Muskie legends Steve Herbeck and Cal Ritchie. Um,
Yeah.
so I think it seems like they all kind of met. Like we've talked about on the pod. Like, what can you do? We've talked about how impossible it'd be to find some sort of laws, get a legal side involved, which just feels impossible. So I think they've taken a good, reasonable step here. Like you said, Max, kind of the first thing in writing, just to get it out there, get people to, sort of understand how big of an issue this is, if somehow they already don't. But yeah, Gus, what are your takeaways?
I mean, it definitely kind of dropped out of nowhere, but honestly, with the way everything's been going down on just everything about FFS and Facebook and all that, you kind of knew it was coming, especially with the stuff that Minnesota was, possibly doing. We've chatted about that a few times, like, some of the Leech Lake laws they were thinking about doing. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's pretty cool. They all came together and kind of brought attention to it. I think that's definitely a good step. I mean, they're definitely they're ahead of the curve. I mean, it's Eagle Lake is giant compared to the small lakes up in, northern Wisconsin, and even giant compared to northern Minnesota and whatnot. And they're already taking big steps ahead to be in advance. Like, I mean, it's saying something if a lake like Eagle, where not a ton of people really live on it, it's just mainly resorts or weekenders in the summer are seeing the effects of it and taking steps forward. So if that's not saying something, that I mean, that's kind of what I got on it.
Yeah, I think that they had one of the paragraphs in here. They had Joe Bucher's opinion, and he kind of called it a Teddy Roosevelt moment, which is kind of funny, but like he's got some points, like where technology has surpassed the principle of a fair chase. I mean, it
Right.
definitely feels like we're getting to that point if it's not already there. Whether this is the Teddy Roosevelt moment that sort of changes the tides on everyone's opinions of forward-facing sonar, I don't know, but at least it's a step. So we'll be curious to see if there's anything else that comes out on this.
Yeah, I feel like I have a handful of different thoughts, and I feel like if you get me in the room with different people and different viewpoints, I could probably feel like I almost would want to play devil's advocate to whoever's kind of talking about it
Right.
because I think it's the spirit of it is kind of what we've talked about on this podcast a handful of times, which is like, when we first got forward facing sonar, we're like, damn, this is cool. And then just gradually we've kind of left it in the garage like a lot. And to the point now where we just, the whole like that aspect of fishing isn't as exciting, if you will. So it's like, the tough thing about this, I think that people can easily argue is like just the first point, using forward facing sonar responsibly. Because it's a little bit
That's
of
a
an
gray area.
interesting gray area thing where it's like people that are wanting you to use forward facing sonar responsibly are the people that might be on the fence of like, we should ban this, we should take this away, but are still using it, feel that the way they're using it and the way we've used it in the past, which is typically, running a weed line, running a rock shelf, something like that, it's pointing out. So you're seeing either how fish are responding to your baits, your bait depth, you're seeing follows that you might not see with your eyes. Um, it seems like that's pretty agreed upon by these people that that's the responsible way to use forward facing sonar, but it does get it gets a little weird when you pass a fish and it doesn't respond to a bait, and it's like, well, there's a muskie, let's cast at it. And
Hmm.
if you're doing that, the difference between doing that and doing it just because you're in 15 feet of water or 12 feet of water, is it really any different than doing it when you're in 30 feet of water and that fish is only 5 feet down? And I think it gets a little bit back to the title of the article of Protect the Tradition, Preserve the Challenge. A lot of this feels like people want to make and continue to keep musky fishing difficult, which is fine.
Hmm.
I'm good with that. But I do feel
Right.
like when I've heard a lot of these comments and the people that talk about it, because there's no actual scientific study done on mortality, it's all people's visual learning experiences of seeing more floating fish, which I do believe, these are great anglers that are talking about this. So it's
Right.
not bullshit. But when there's no scientific study done, the argument does at times kind of fall flat to, well, what's the difference of catching fish if you're not targeting them super deep out in open water compared to seeing fish by weeds or by rocks and making a cast at them that way? Like just because you are running a weed line in a known musky spot, you know, does that make you more
Hmm.
ethical than the person that's targeting them out in open water in a known musky spot? That's where I am kind of struggling with all this.
I see what
Where
you're
I,
saying.
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
like, does it
There,
preserve the challenge? In some aspects, I think it could make the challenge harder. Like you see what's happened in Minnesota. If you don't have a live scope, you're fucked. And even if you do have one, they become ultra finicky to the pressure and like constant baits going 5 feet in front of their head. So does that make the challenge easier or harder? I don't know. I guess time will tell. But also, like you said, there's no scientific evidence that, live scope is the culprit for killing muskie. Um, I you're never gonna have that
yeah,
evidence. You're never gonna be able to
you
count
gotta
all the
have
dead fish.
yeah, you gotta have a study on like I don't know, a standalone lake. I mean,
Yeah.
Honestly, one that comes to mind, which I don't actually know if they supplement themselves, but the fully DNR managed lake up here in Vilas,
Mhm.
Escanaba, where you have to like sign in to a DNR station and sign out, and there's fishing hours there. That could be a study lake. I mean, you'd hate to
What are you
go
gonna
and
do
decimate a
though?
population just for a study. I don't know, catch
Go
them
go out there and just
and
sharpshoot them out of 30 feet and see what happens, or
I
like what?
I mean, I don't
Go
know,
on,
man.
swim off.
How else are you gonna know if they're truly all dying? But then every lake is made up differently. I don't know. It's
Well, the thing that a lot of people keep going back to is it's more or less just like, yeah, okay, we can argue barotrauma, we can argue the appropriate depths to target muskies. Is it 17 feet? Is it 27 feet? Is it 34 feet? We don't exactly know that depth. I think there's, maybe
right.
call it about a 20-foot respectable line on where you can target these fish. But as we've heard from Jordan Weeks and from other people, that every lake is kind of different. Time of year is different, depending if the water's hot, depending if the water's cold. There's just a lot of different variables to ever
Yeah.
exactly know what the ethical line to fish these fish are in. To me, a lot of the arguments that I hear is like, well, maybe it's not the actual fact that we're pulling these fish out of open water, is it's just the fact that people are catching a lot more fish. And so with increased handling, um, equates to
Yeah.
increased mortality. But again, that argument's kind of tough because it's just like, well, I was catching a bunch of fish and now everybody's catching a bunch of fish. And that's not good
Yeah.
anymore because these a
It's
lot of
not
these
a good
people don't
thing, I
know how to
guess.
handle fish. So is it like, should it be more, you know, education on how to handle fish, how to have proper release tools, more funding for stocking, like these things that we've talked about. Again, I say all this definitely in support of the flyer. I think the crux of what they're trying to do is really good because as we've talked about, there's most likely never gonna be a full on ban of live
Full
scope.
ban. Yep.
Um, and so really the only thing you can do is kind of make people feel guilty for using it. I mean, are you going to
Yeah.
be the group that goes up to Eagle Lake and stays at one of these resorts and you're going to be the boat that's going to be out in open water sharpshooting when everybody else is driving past these flyers? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe you don't give a shit, but I'm saying right now, I think for me personally, if I went to Eagle Lake and saw this flyer, I would definitely think twice about being in a boat that had live scope.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want all the locals up there looking at me like,
Right.
fuck this guy, bringing his live scope up here or something like
So
that.
maybe it'll
Definitely.
be the year of peer pressure. Peer pressure enough
Yeah.
people out of it and like, all right, you want to feel the guilt,
Just be
man? Go
like,
ahead.
all right, sick. All right, keep doing it. You
It
do you,
it
man.
it kind of feels like it's just gonna have to be this angler's self-regulating other anglers where, like whether it's just I don't know. Like if you see somebody, because like again, it's just a suggestion. Like they're saying avoid sharpshooting, road running, or spotlighting, which I would assume is equivalent to driving around under power of your boat with multiple scopes or one live scope and trying to find fish in open water. Um,
Yeah, I think that's
so
what it's
like
targeting for that sentence or one bullet point for sure.
like I bet you if you're the boat doing that on Eagle Lake this year, you're probably going to get a lot more funny, probably even more funny looks this year than you were getting last year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's true. That's probably kind of what it is in Minnesota now, I'm sure, even though it seemed like it started to get lopsided there, where if you didn't have it, like Brian was saying, it's like, oh, you're absolutely screwed out there. Not going to be able to get a fish to eat. And then, northern Wisconsin, it's still just like a dabble here, a dabble there. You don't really see it that often, but it's already so late into the FFS conversation that even when you do see it up here, it kind of looks funny. Like I'm not used to seeing it. It's just like, I don't know. It's interesting, but it's
Yeah.
still not happening a lot for the most part. It really depends on what system you go to. Higher chance if you go to a Cisco based or a deeper lake.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
it's
for
just what
sure.
we've talked about plenty of times up in northern Wisconsin. It's like if you have the ability to go a cast structure all day and have the ability to catch just as many fish as if you were out in open water, most people are going to opt for
Yeah.
the former rather than the latter, where it sounds like in some of these other systems, targeting fish out deeper and in open water is they're a lot more susceptible to it. So,
Yeah.
I don't know, man. It brought out some takes. We'll leave it at that. I mean,
It's
Yeah,
it's
kind of
Facebook
like
got heated.
he did.
yeah. I feel like it's this like whole Livescope thing. It's like we're beating a dead horse. Like
Yeah.
just been going on. It feels like forever, and it's just like like nothing's changed. Like it's like just in the same place it was. Like I mean, I don't know. It just feels like the big static thing that like pisses a bunch of people off, and then like it. We're all just gonna have to
Dude,
live with it. I think. Like
I can't tell if I get more mad about like people driving around and sharpshooting fish than I get at the people who just get mad at the people that are sharpshooting fish on Facebook and just saying like, "Oh, like or just assuming that fish are caught with live scope." Or, I don't know. I'm not
Yeah.
wording that right because I get where they're like, if the Eagle River chain was like a open water by year round and people were out there just pillaging it, I bet I would feel a lot different,
yeah.
than
Right. Our home
I do
waters isn't
now.
getting bombarded by live scope.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if you watch people off your dock, it's like, oh, there's one to just snipe
yeah.
it.
So
I'd be
I can
pretty
Oh,
ki-
I
pissed.
I
would
can
I would be
respect
livid.
that. Yeah, and
Yeah.
so I can respect that. Maybe it's not. I don't get mad maybe at those, but it's just like the people that are. I don't know. Is it like grandstanding or virtue signaling where you just get people on the way other end where it's like I don't even know what technology is, and I still catch a bunch of muskies, and this is bullshit. And it's I don't know.
Yeah.
The arguments just piss me off. And then the other side where it's like, oh, it's there's people were pissed when side imaging and 2D came out. And it's like, dude, if you can't
It's
recognize the difference between side imaging
yeah.
and 2D to a legit thermal live imaging screen on
Yeah.
your boat, like you're insane.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what I was saying, I was actually having this conversation with a buddy today too. It's like, and in no way of those transducers when they came out, and even mapping, can you buy multiple of to make you more effective?
Yeah.
You
Oh,
know
I
what I
got
mean?
two
You buy two
maps.
live
Cool.
scopes, two maps. Wow, great. Two 2Ds, great. A high speed and a low speed, doesn't matter. Two live scopes, big difference. You just added like another 150 feet of range or whatever the hell they go up to now.
Can,
Right.
can you imagine when they first like the first trolling motor came out, started making its way around to people's boats? People were probably fucking up in arms.
Oh my God.
Half of us got a row, and y'all get this little. I can't
God,
imagine
jeez.
To
covering
me,
water.
Or-
we didn't live through it, but to me, this feels like it's probably similar to when Catch and Release came out with Muskies Inc. and it wasn't required by law, but it just became more of like hey, we can't keep killing every single fish we catch because they'll probably not exist
Yeah.
anymore. You know what I mean?
right. Yeah,
Um,
because that's a long strung out battle. I think it's fully on the side of catch and release, and you get your every once in a while people that keep them. I'd like to think that pretty much over 99% of people that target muskies don't target them to keep them, but you never know. Um, but yeah, it's just this live scope thing could just get drawn out for God knows how long. I mean, it's being regulated in the places it can, tournaments and whatnot. And then we have this, protect the tradition, preserve the challenge, flyer and Eagle Lake. So that's just another kind of start of it. So we'll see what happens. We have plenty of buddies that go fish Eagle Lake, so we'll see what they see and maybe get some reports on if they have some sharpshooters out there even this summer.
You
I
don't think
I'm
you don't
Oh, sorry, Brian. Go ahead. I was just gonna say real quick. Oh, we're getting feedback.
Where's that?
Oh,
Hello?
y'all good?
We're good?
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
hearing that
yeah.
too.
We're good. I was just
Sounds
gonna
good on
say
my end.
I'm really excited after the season to follow up and see if this changes anything because I think that's what everyone's kind of waiting to see right now is like is just a flyer, is a piece of paper going to make a difference? Um,
I don't know.
I honestly think it might a
I
little
think
bit.
it will.
Yeah.
I think it'll rattle some cans around. That's
Yeah,
for sure.
I
Absolutely.
agree.
All
Stay
right. Well,
tuned.
we definitely, yeah, stay tuned on that. All right. We'll definitely beat that up. Let's see if we can get a few people on the line here before we get JVR on. And let's see. It's been a minute, so some of these might be slightly outdated. Apologies, but we want to get them in. So let's let the first one rip.
Hey boys, Aaron Priest here. Hashtag Muskie suck, you don't have to. Just want to thank you guys again for this platform you got going on here. You know, it's I'd call it a safe space. You know, where grown ass men can share. And got something I gotta get off my chest here. You know, bring something to light. I suffer a little. I suffer in silence, but no more. Just, you know, open up and share about what I could only call, you know, an affliction or a disease almost. I suffer from something I call premature elation. You know, fishing and feel that bump, that key bump to fish, and you know, start breathing heavy and, you know, whacking on that fish, reeling it in as fast as I can, and giggling and get that fish to boat side and spits the hooks, you know, and one flap of the tail, a splash of water, and I'm left standing there, you know, with a limp rod in my hands, and my fishing trousers are wet. And everyone on the boat is pointing and laughing. God, it's painful to even think about it now. I mean, I've tried so many different things to try to remedy this. I mean, God, sometimes I even practice at home alone. You know, put a YouTube video on, or I don't know what they call it, OnlyFans. Watch some musky videos and practice. You know, but no matter what I do, no matter every damn time I'm out there on the water and I get that bump and boom, it's over. You know, in a matter of seconds. I'm just yelling and screaming and crying. It's just this. I'm ashamed. Premature elation. I just don't know if anyone else has ever experienced anything like this, or if you guys have any type of advice for me. I would just, God, I regret leaving this message now.
That's good.
Hey,
That's
Aaron, you
good.
don't have to suffer in silence anymore, brother.
We're here for you.
That was
Went through
that was
that.
kind of painful to listen to until he got to like the fish part. I was like, God, what are we getting into here? Great
Yeah, he didn't know
actor.
how he was going to tie together, and then it came perfectly together.
Yeah.
Like, we getting an accidental phone call here? It should be meant for somebody else.
That's awesome.
Oh, good
Oh,
stuff.
great
God,
one from Aaron.
I always love his voice messages. Too funny.
They're the best, the best. All right, we got one in here from, well, I'll just let it ride. I'll say who it's from right away.
Speaking of another repeat customer.
Hi, this is Nate from Pittsburgh. Hey, I was just wondering, you know, you guys talk about spot burning and stuff. You guys ever encounter anything about people bird burning? There's a guy here I fish with. His name's Jake. He makes baits. He is always bird burning. He keeps telling people where all the eagles' nests are. And you know what's going to be next? There's going to be people out there watching them eagles and looking for them. And you know what's after that? I bet you people are going to be out there scoping them with binoculars, live scoping them even. I don't know. It just doesn't sit right with me. What are your thoughts on burning spots, especially nest spots? I'll hang up. Love your show.
I'll
Thanks,
hang
Nate,
up and
bud.
listen.
I'll hang up and listen.
Yeah,
Spot
them
burning
damn
ain't cool.
binoculars, man. That's a hot topic too. I don't know if we want to get down that road. How unfair those
The
things are.
binos out?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like
I
we
don't
could get
know.
into
I
some
think,
muddy waters there.
yeah,
Really
I heard
ruffle
that's
some
the thing out
feathers.
on like
Don't
the
need to
Great
get
Lakes.
the binocular side of the internet. Don't need to get down that route.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, dude, the other day I was out fishing and there was a pontoon boat with two ladies in it, and the one not driving was up in the front area of it, and she had like a damn telescope to see the moon up in front, just
Damn.
peeping all over the place.
Just a mega
Like, what are
binoc.
you doing? Just like a mega binoc. That's pretty funny.
Maggie binoc. Crazy.
Yeah. But to answer your question, Nate Bud, spot burning, not cool. Watch who you show your spots to.
Not
Yeah.
cool.
Another one from Nate from Pittsburgh.
Hey, this is Nate from Pittsburgh. I just want to say congrats on a 100 episode, guys. We love yins.
Wow.
Thanks.
Number one fan.
Appreciate it, Nate, bud. Couple episodes late, but that's all right.
Appreciate you, boy.
Thanks for tapping in. Appreciate you.
Boy.
All right, let's let another one rip from our one and only Mr. Huntsy Tales.
Oh.
Hey guys, Kyle here from New Franken, Wisconsin, calling in again. Just watched Rory win the Masters this weekend, so I know I brought up some bets in the last call that I made. So 1 out of 3 happened. I know the next one was Brian catching a fish on the glider, and Packers winning the Super Bowl. I guess what are your thoughts on the trifecta happening now that the first one happened?
Wow.
I know you're probably going to have
Great
to
call.
keep this in the vault for a few weeks, as Brian's more of a guest lately than he is a co-host. So
Jeez.
hopefully he's on next time. We
tape.
can hear his answer on this, but I'd like to see all 3 happen this year. So, all right, let me know what you think.
Get
Yeah,
him
you
off
lucky
the
I played that
mic.
one.
Pull the mic away from this guy.
Lucky that you're in this call. I kind of forgot that he said that. Called you out.
Yeah, I forgot he called in. When did he call in and we were talking about that? Was that, like months ago,
Some
right?
mid-March.
Yeah.
Early
Talking
to
about-
mid-March, yeah.
Yeah, so shit. I think I said Rory's gonna win a major. There we go. 1 down.
Check.
What was the second one? Oh, glider.
Catch a fish on a glider. I
Straight
think
up
he
not,
said it
not
had to
excited
be,
to do that.
I think it had to be like over 36 or something like that.
Yeah, I
wanna say
remember
he
that.
said. Maybe
I
40,
don't want
wanna
to.
say,
Yeah, I
but
don't want to
probably
be
not.
stuck to a glider all opener weekend, but I'll throw it a little bit.
Okay.
Every fool strikes gold every once in a while.
Blind squirrel finds his nut, as they say.
And Packer win the Super Bowl. Hey man, I thought they had a great draft.
You might win a couple playoff games, make it interesting.
Draft was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see.
We'll see where the Packers line up after this year, but going
lot
in as
of,
always,
lot of
Pack
pressure on the
fans,
Pack. A lot of pressure on
Yeah.
the Pack. If Brian catches a fish over 35 inches on a glider.
Yeah, that might make
Yeah,
the
we might have
Packers
to
too
tell 'em.
nervous. I don't know. I don't know if I want to do that.
All right, let's let this last one rip from poorly made musky memes.
Whoa, shut up.
Hey guys, Poorly Made Musky Memes here. I have a question regarding your lure techniques. More specifically, what's something you catch yourself doing that you realize is something that hinders you? Maybe like a wrong technique, sticking to the same lure, changing lures too many times, etc. I'm going to hang up and I look forward to hearing your answer.
Brian, you think switching lures too many times hinders your musky catching abilities?
No,
Kind of
I
want to hear
think-
your thoughts on that.
I think that's probably one of my greatest strengths, right? I think a lot of times anglers nowadays get
Right.
caught up on using a favorite bulldog. It's got to be the bite. It's got to be the bite. Beating a dead horse. Don't be afraid to mix it up. Throw something gaudy. Throw something new and see how they react. So yeah, I guess. God, now I forget what the even question was from Poorly here.
Can I say something real quick? First of all, pretty straightforward question there from Poorly. Thought we were gonna get something off the hinge from Poorly Made
He makes
Musky
some-
Mean.
He's behaving himself.
Crazy memes, hilarious memes.
Yeah. Second of all, it's like when you think you're gonna think, or what am I trying to say?
No,
I had an idea of what his voice would sound like, and I think I always just assumed he like permanently used a distorter for his voice to continue to conceal his identity. Seems just like a stand-up guy.
Yeah, just stock gentleman.
It's like well spoken.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hope
Absolutely.
that answers your question, Poorly.
Shout out Poorly.
Shout out.
Appreciate you.
Shout out. Shout out.
All right, we're gonna fire up Mr. JVR here.
Wanted.
I think let's dive right into it. Here is the interview with JVR. All right, here on the line, we got none other than JVR, who we've had on this podcast before and needs no introduction. A guide up here in the Northwoods, also travels around and does some steelheading, duck hunting, and ice fishing, just offer of all species, extraordinaire. So, but we're coming in on musky season pretty soon. He's been on the water a lot, so we're gonna get right into it. JVR, how you doing tonight?
Good, man. Good to see you guys. Good to be back. Heck yeah.
Good to see you. Welcome.
Yep. Almost time for green fish up here. We got a couple weeks yet, or 2 weeks or so.
That's right.
Walleyes and stuff are scratching the itch for the time being. I'm looking forward to it, man. It's going to be a good year.
Yeah, let's
Awesome.
get it. Let's get into that right away. Your walleye opener. I
Yep.
saw on your Instagram you had some pictures of some nice ones. So how did that all go for you?
It was good. Like I said, I think top to bottom, this at least in Wisconsin here, the weatherman was pretty wrong for opening day. There, we were see that bright sunny skies, 32 degrees, whatever they were saying. They were calling for up here a little bit warmer to the south. And it sounds like the best window for the guys for Southern Muskie opener was certainly that morning window down there where the clouds hung around. And for us up here too, I mean, we had clouds around till, I don't know, 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. The bite stayed actually pretty good. Woke up, to get out there, get out nice and early. I think we started at, I think I met my guys like 5 a.m. Or so, a little after 5:30, somewhere in there. And leave the house and it was 42 instead of 32, which was a nice surprise. And it ended up being pretty nice. But there's been basically no wind for the better part of the season so far until today, and a little bit yesterday we had a little bit of blowing, but the fishing's been good, man. We ripped through them pretty good in the mornings and the evenings. The last couple of days, mornings were a little tougher, certainly with the cold starts, but it's been good.
Nice. Did you
awesome.
did you still try every once in a while the Southern Muskie opener, or did you do that in the past?
So, I've had for the last 5-6 years here, I've had the same guys for opening day. And then I've had another group that's usually comes on Sunday. I think maybe 4 out of the last 6 years or so, 6-7 years, they've been out my Sunday, and I've had some other groups rotate through there. So up here, I mean, it's nice to be able to get going right off the bat on the walleyes. Our fishing up here is pretty excellent that time of year, especially when we get the little bit later ice offs.
Yeah.
This year was kind of about right at average, honestly. Everybody kind of had the thinking it was going to be a late ice off, but really it came off about the right time, and we had warm weather following it, so things are kind of off to the races here. So but no, I haven't gone down and done the Southern opener, but like I said, we did through the Muskie Academy there, all those guys, all the reports coming back and in the kind of live talk over the course of the weekend. There was some really nice fish caught down there, some good bites going for sure.
So speaking of weather and how things are shaping up, talk about the ice off. I think really my main thing I'm curious here for you this evening is in regards to the weather and kind of what your thoughts are on really the muskie season coming up, muskie opener, stuff like that. Obviously, the last couple of years has been all over the place in May. Feels like this year we're actually getting a pretty, like you said, normal ice off. May so far has been kind of gradually heating up. Are we actually going to get like a pretty normal quote unquote May with some good heat up, good spawn, and maybe a good start to the year this year, you think?
Yeah, it's looking that way. Down south, those fish have been through the spawn already pretty regularly. There's a few fish still holding eggs, and in some of those systems, those fish that may have eggs still may not even spawn. It's gotten to that point down there. Some of the more advanced systems up by us, I've witnessed muskies spawning on 2 different lakes that we fished. I've been on about 8 different lakes in the last 4 days, maybe now 9 or 10 different lakes in the last 4 days. Between all the mornings and full days and half days and bouncing around, and even just checking stuff out in between trips, just kind of getting your finger on the pulse. It's always I feel like the season's been open for 2 weeks and it's 4 days in. But it's one of those things where it's very, very system dependent. The one thing I will say, I just got off the lake. I took the kids out today. I picked them up from school after my trip today. We did well and got there, picked up the kids, went out right from school, and we went to go hit some stuff that I thought was going to be pretty much a guarantee for crappies. And there was just no weeds. The water temp was like 58 degrees. Everything looked good that way. We did pick up a few, but the bigger pods were not there. The lily pads weren't quite up yet. It's one of those things where I expected it to be. In about 72 hours from now, it'll be about where I was expecting it to be, given the forecast, all that sun and everything. That stuff grows amazingly fast once the ball gets rolling. But when there's nothing for them to really hang on there in terms of old weeds or at least some emerging lily pads or something, at least in the lake that we went to, they just tend to hang off the break there, and you could drive around and find them and do that, but we weren't set up for that. We just got out for an hour or two with the kiddos, and they wanted to get in the boat. The weather was halfway decent, a little bit of wind, but other than that, so. But like I said, the weed growth is definitely behind on a lot of places up here. But the muskie spawn has been underway, certainly on our more advanced systems, the shallower, anything with a river, any of the flowagey stuff. And I would even say some of that stuff, they might be close to done, honestly. The walleyes were way ahead of schedule from what I would have thought given the date of the ice out. But we had warm enough weather that kind of kept things rolling along. And quite frankly, those fish don't need our walleyes up here. And muskies wouldn't ever really coincide with ice out. But our walleyes, especially when the ice holds on, a lot of it does run through photo period. So when those fish get, into later in the year like this, it's the same with any spawning fish. It could be walleyes. It could be steelhead is probably one of the things where I see it where it's most pronounced. But, the later in the run it gets for like the steelhead, for example, you get fish that come in the river in say middle of March when it's early or end of February, it might take them a while for that skein to break off the eggs, for those eggs to get loose, for them to get juicy, usually several days, maybe even a week or more, depending on what you've got for water temperatures and what's going on in the system. Whereas towards the end of the run, you'll see it, say like, mid to end of April 15th to 20th, somewhere in there. When those fish come in and hit that river, they're ready to hop on gravel and do the spawning thing the minute they get there because the lake is cold. They're hitting in the tributaries, and the tributaries are warmer than the lake, and they're at that right spawning temp. They come in and boom, they hop right on gravel, start fanning, and they'll dump their eggs. And a lot of those females will be coming up. And it's very similar with walleyes. It's the only reason I'm using this. But with steelhead, you can actually visibly see them when they come up and do that. And they come in, They dump their load, and they're on their way back out to the lake or hanging in a hole downriver by 11 o'clock in the morning. They might have rolled in the dark, hopped on gravel at 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning before the sun's even up. And they're all pounding gravel and spawning. And then as soon as their eggs are done, they get off those reds and then they slide back to the hole. So you see all these empty fish that are chrome as a dime, blue in the back. They've clearly been in the river less than a day, maybe only a couple of hours. And it's the same with walleyes and muskies too. The later into that time frame you get into their spawn, they don't come up and hang in those areas the way that they would if the ice went off in say late March or something, versus kind of the later in the season, or if the water temps became suitable for them. So they come up, and the ones that are straggling on there, the water temperature might be high or higher than what you'd expect for a spawn, but they come up, do the deed, and they're on their way back out, quick turn and burn.
Yeah. Do you think they ever go back in again if you get a cold snap and it gets cold and then all of a sudden it heats up again?
You'll see that
right
again,
back?
like I said, whether it's muskies, it's walleyes, it's steelhead. If things become not conducive to them doing the spawning process, yes, they will. I think they'll very much drop off the break. They're usually just hanging on the secondary break. If the spawning area is there and there's a little lip at that 12 to 18 foot or 18 to 22 foot mark, they're usually just piled up right there. And it's hard to get them to eat a lot of times, depending on the lake, depending on the situation, because they really don't like. And walleye muskies, and I usually say this with anything, but it's true for all spawning species. Like they don't like that elevated temperature. Things get up, things get going, things get juicy, and then a quick big pause button where it's like, boom, the water temperature drops 10 degrees and it's, 31 degrees in the morning. It can really kind of hamper that. And they get really pouty when that happens. Now, in our lakes up here, we're a little less susceptible to it because, that surface temp doesn't go down that far. In a river system, now that can be, again, for muskies, walleyes, trout, doesn't matter. The river system, that temperature can change maybe a little bit more dramatically because of the runoff or snow, stuff like that where it's contributing.
Yeah. And you've talked about this countless times in other podcasts, your Muskie Academy and everything, where you talk about temperature swings not being good. We're hitting that, like, what you say, 6, 7 plus degree.
About 8 to 10 degrees. Yeah. If you get like 8 to 10 degrees and any
more. Yeah.
And more than just like the top 3 inches, right? We had calm day yesterday or a couple days ago, it was like 82 up here and flat calm. And, that's not really. Okay, wow, it says, 54 degrees, then the wind blows and it's immediately 43 or so. You know what I mean? It's just, that's not what I mean, right? It has to be that kind of sustained heat. But yeah, it can throw it off for sure. And there again, that all comes into play too, how those fish are, what stage of the spawning process they're in. If they're still very spawn minded, and again, it varies by species a little bit. Some fish are easier to catch when they're spawning than others. A bluegill or a crappie, when it's on the bed or spawning, you can throw something in, you're going to get it. A steelhead or something, you might not, right? Or salmon, whatever. They might be spawning. They got other stuff going on. You can throw it in there. And yeah, you might get them. You might not. Walleye is kind of the same thing. You'll see in these years where we've had the later ice offs, it's not to say that you certainly can't catch walleyes when they're spawning, but you'll see it too, where it gets tougher to catch them. And the reason you are catching the fish you're catching is because there's so many there. You can use the rivers as an example of that too. If you were to be able to actually drain it and see how many were there, you're catching some fish. But the number of fish that are actually like super focused on the spawn and not really looking at your bait is way more than you'd ever think. and you happen to get a couple of them just because of the sheer concentration there. But a lot of times it's not that they're fast and furious feeding; it's just that you're picking off a few that are there. But if it were on a per capita basis, it'd be much lower than you would have thought otherwise in a normal feeding situation.
Yeah. No, I've been actually kind of seeing that while smallmouth fishing when, we're having these kind of weird east winds and whatnot. And if I'm spot locked on a spot and I see on side image like a couple blips go by the screen, or I'm on a pod that I know about on this wind blown spot, it's pretty normal to just pick off like one or two, even though know there's 10 to 20, 25 of them cruising around. You know that they're moving, but they're just not going to eat. They're just not
and
all.
They too. They're very
hungry.
susceptible to that same kind of temperature deal. If you get that nice sustained warm, they kind of come on to play, and that especially that crankbait bite gets going for them, kind of about that low 50-degree range, up to 40 sometimes, depending on the lake and depending how late in the year. But that 49 to 52, and that starts going for them. As long as it continues to build towards the spawn, like they stay pretty good. The bite can be actually quite exceptional. But if it were to drop and then it goes way down, they get pretty pouty. Then if it continues to warm, obviously, then they end up just hopping on the beds, and then you're on to the next transition, from pre-spawn into the spawn. But I kind of went around your question earlier. You asked more about the muskies and what the lakes were doing. Max had, and
that's all right.
I think a lot of what's going on, though, as far as what we're looking at for our opener shaping up, at least from what I've seen so far, I think the muskies are going to be through the spawn based on what I see for the forecast for the next 7 to 10 days. By the time Memorial Day weekend gets here, I think our muskies are going to be well through the spawn. It's not to say that there can't be a few fish hanging around, obviously, and there usually are, well past, regardless of how early. Just because at that level, you're talking about just an individual fish's biology, especially something big like a muskie, right? If there's just not that many of them, and you get one that comes in late, well, that's one fish is a higher percentage of the population than one individual walleye, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to have a few of those fish hanging around. But our weed growth should be on par here. Again, a lot of sun in the forecast. It is not really well established and going too many places right now, with the exception of the very, very stained shallow lakes that were the first to ice off or to lose ice. There's some stuff that's a foot to 3 foot high already. But anything outside of that, the lake I mentioned earlier that I took the kids to tonight is usually a pretty early pop for that cabbage, and it was 6 inches to a foot tall. If that, the lily pads were up a foot. I could see them down there. They're starting to come, but they're all like conical like that and just popping out of the mud in that 2 to 4 foot of water range. They just weren't quite ready yet. So, but they will be. Again, we got 2-3 weeks of opener here, and water temps are pretty good. Our sustained, the biggest, deepest lakes right now are looking at about 44 to 46 ish on your real big stuff. Your twin, your Presque Isle, stuff, the biggest, deepest stuff around. Sustained in main lakes, certainly a little warmer in the back bays. I have seen stuff as high as in the 60s on like tonight on the windblown shore of that lake that I went to where the weed was behind. It was 59 to 61 and a half with a stiff 15-mile-an-hour wind. On the other side of the lake where the warm water had left was about 54 to 56. So which is still pretty warm for right now, right? That's a pretty good temperature for May.
That is, yeah.
So things are going to progress, like I said, but it just kind of went fast forward with all that, but it's going to level out nicely.
Yeah, I think what people often forget, sorry, Brian, I just wanted to kind of like chime in. It's not really a question, but and I often forget it too, is that, where we're at, just the difference between northern Vilas and southern Oneida in temperature range is quite drastic.
Yes,
like big
absolutely.
time.
It really hammers home that point if you're ever driving there right around the time like the snow is melting. I worked forestry. It's always kind of we'd start south and work our way north, starting like southern Lincoln, southern Price, all that stuff, because that's where the snow line, as that snow line recedes, and you'll be down there and there's been no snow for a week or maybe even 2, and then you drive up to somewhere like say Iron County and there's still 1.5 feet of snow on the ground. That's not on every mile you go north from that, like say that Tomahawk line. It's amazing how much of a difference that is, and that's no different with the lakes, certainly.
Yeah, that's wild. I've always thought about that being down in Appleton. I mean, it's 3 hours away. There's a lot of days where it's like a 20-degree difference. So something's going on in between here and there. But back to the muskie opener. You had said like you're expecting a lot of them to be post spawn. I mean, what's kind of your thought on their phases after that? I mean, a lot of times, right, they'll slide off onto the break, and then a lot of times though they will go back to like those spawning grounds then, kind of throughout the middle part of the season. I mean, what do you expect for most of them?
Yeah, so once those muskies spawn, that it's really it's, that spawn is such a critical and crucial thing. It's such a big focal point of any fish's life cycle that, it depending on when that goes, it's very much the trendsetter. It's very much the pace setter for at least the next several weeks, if not the next, month and a half of the muskie season. In particular muskies. Because their spawn seems to just tend to drag out more. It's a little bit more finicky. You get that drop in temperature, they kind of back off. They don't want to do the thing, and then it warms up, and they're up there doing it. Whereas, like, you'll get those. I think maybe it's just because they're not group spawners, really. Like, they're not the kind of that are just going to roll up en masse, dozens or hundreds at a time, and start just dumping and going. I think that's kind of why. They're also not a bed spawner, right? So they don't come up and pick out a spot where you got males guarding nests, and they, the females are in there making them and doing their thing. Depending on the species, muskies is just a little different. They come up, they pair up, they broadcast spawn as they drop, and it really depends if you get that nice stable weather when that process starts to occur in a system. And now again, think in northern Wisconsin here, we can have that happening on a lake right now as we speak, and on another lake it could be 2 weeks away, even with a pretty mediocre to decent forecast, just because of the sheer size and when the ice went off. So you basically got when the ice goes off is one of the biggest, things that you look at for a lake. That's like, boom, put that on the calendar. And then you start doing like the D+1, D+2, like how many days past ice out. And then the spawn is basically the other event when those fish enter the spawn in that system. And again, it can be different, the flowages or anything small or super stained, Irving Lake, for example, is going to be way, way, way ahead of, Trout Lake, for example. So, and that's like the hugest, margin because of the way those lakes lay out. One is, max depth of 10 feet, and the other one is 100 some feet, right? So when you've got those things going, you're going to have that happen at different times in each system. And as that progresses, those fish are going to do basically the same thing. It's just going to be in relation to their system. In a big, deep lake, fish hanging on the secondary break or even a tertiary break off or suspended or on the bottom, right, depending on how deep they are, off the spawning ground won't quite be the same as one where it gets cold in a super shallow lake. They just might be laying in 7 or 8 or maybe 8 or 9 feet of water, not 18 to 25 feet of water. So depending on what you're looking for, always just look for that area outside the spawning areas. It just remember that's going to be relative to the lake, right? You can't just say, oh well, when that happens, they just go to 12 feet. Well, in some lakes, the equivalent of 12 feet might be 6, or the equivalent of that 12 feet might be 18 to 20, right? So that's that secondary break line. When I say that's what I'm talking about. The secondary break outside the spawning areas is really a great place to find those females that are either just recently done spawn, if they're not in limp mode after they dump, they'll lay up in the weeds. They just go up in there, and you see it on clear lakes. Your North Twin's a good example, and just kind of they're laying all over the sand when they're done spawning, or maybe if they're pre-spawn a little bit, they just belly to the bottom, rubbing in the sand. They're not going to move for anything. Even if you drive a boat over the top of them, they're just like, nope, not doing it. They're just exhausted and completely done. And that's and so if they're not in that mode, a lot of times they might be doing that same thing just off the break. So like I said, those big females are always the holy grail is certainly the one that's still carrying that egg weight that either is not going to spawn that year because things got a little wonky, or that one that is already done and entered that post spawn feed. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, you're asking?
Right.
Oh,
no, I was gonna wait till you're done. I was just putting my hand up to yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
No.
Yeah, good.
Good.
So that's a good place to look for them. I mean, again, the secondary break outside, that's going to be the one that you don't hear about as much, or I mean, you guys, you've been through the Musky Academy stuff. You've heard about that in the videos, and they talk about a lot in those reports because it is such a crucial staging area. But for the focal point of your starting season, I mean, going to those spawning areas is never wrong. There's always going to be some fish that are there, whether it's because of the spawn or because of what's coming into the spawn next. Today we saw a large amount of suckers up spawning, going through the shallows on a different lake. That was with customers before I picked up the kiddos. And I mean, one of those things, they're in full spawn. I mean, we're going through there, there goes 50 of them, there goes 20 of them. They were just covered up in there in the same area where those panfish and those muskies are also spawning. We did see 2 muskies swim by today. One was baby 35, one was maybe 37, 38, both very clearly males, all scarred up. And again, so it's May 7th or whatever, 7th, 8th, whatever it is right now. So if they're already spawning, and that was a pretty good sized lake, definitely not a puddle, and one that you would expect to be a little further behind than it was. So like I said, I think we're on track for that. But again, those spawning areas are always good. It's just going to be a function of being there at the right time and through the right bait.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah, no, sorry. The thing I was maybe going to chime in there, and I kind of want to hear your opinions on this, and it's something that we've heard friends kind of dabble in the idea. We've dabbled in the idea. So, quick story to, touch on what you're saying about spawning muskies in their mood when they're laying up in the sand, shallow water in a clear lake. We had friends last year on opener just totally ex-nay the muskie program. They just went bass fishing. And they were on a gin clear lake and it had muskies, and up shallow they saw two giant females, and they brought their muskie rods with. They're like, oh, we can see them. We're just gonna pitch at them. And they said it was so calm and they could see them so well that they just casted by them. And it might have been exaggeration, who knows? But he said he could damn near see its eyeballs move to look at the bait, and that's it. Never moved a single muscle at all. And that's, Memorial Day weekend of last year when we had ice off, and I don't know, it was like March and then it went back on, then it was off again in April. Either way, it was early ice off.
Yep.
But we've dabbled in the idea of going to one of the bigger lakes in Vilas or Oneida with, deep clear systems, Cisco base, giant systems, and trying to go after those really big fish. But it's like, is that just a wild goose chase when if they're in the spawn like that, you're literally going after fish that will not eat if you hit it
can be
wrong?
it can be but I mean, it just, again, it depends that if they've already gone up and kind of tried to do the thing and then pulled back and then they get even more grumpy, or if it's they're waiting to just go up. Because muskies, when they're in that pre-spawn, and we don't get to experience it here very much, but if you talk to people that fish, say the Fox Chain in Illinois or other places where there's no season, there is a pretty good, and we see it here, right? We see it up north. The best example I can give you up here is, there's always it always seems to be like about a week before muskie season when things are, unless there's something really wonky going on, but there's always a time frame to Memorial Day weekend in northern Wisconsin where I'm out walleye fishing every day and whatnot, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, we had two muskies grab crappies today, or we had two muskies grab walleyes today, and that's when those muskies are in pre-spawn. They haven't quite spawned yet. It's usually walleyes, right? So a lot of times it's walleyes because when the crappies start spawning, the muskies are usually kind of doing the same thing. And not to say that they can't still eat, but it's usually right in that time frame, and it's somewhere between the walleyes being well after the spawn to the point where maybe a few males are hanging around, but they're well past the spawn. The bass are up shallow. The crappies maybe just getting on the beds, or they're in a heavy pre-spawn, really thinking about getting on beds and dispersing. It's right about that time frame every year that we'll see it, and that's usually when you start seeing muskies actively chasing a walleye to the boat or coming in. And at that time, when they're pre-spawn like that, that can be a really good window. That can be, and you get them. They're eating just like a late fall bite almost. Like it can be a tight window. Water's cold. Don't expect it to be, summer peak August, right? It's not that, but there are some pretty good bites to be had if you are able to fish them legally at that time. So if when the opener comes, they're still in that mode, yeah, you got a good chance of getting one. Interestingly, this past weekend, the biggest fish for the reports in Muskie Academy there, Mike got a big one, upper 40-inch fish, still carrying egg weight down somewhere in southern Wisconsin down there. And that one ate a swimming bait of some sort. I didn't ask him what kind. I think a swimming dog, I'm sure, or Poseidon, something of that nature. And that was it's still carrying full egg weight. I mean, it was an absolute horse. So that was one of those ones where he did exactly what we just talked about. He's like, I listened to it in the videos. We talked about it before. He's been in my boat a bunch of times. I talked to him pretty frequently. And he's like, I'm going to swing for the fences and we're going to go for it. And he did. And he ended up getting one. So in the exact thing that you just described is it can pay off. But again, it's not going to be every fishing system that'll cooperate. And you're swinging for the fences. It's exactly what you're doing. But if you get one to eat a 47 to 49-inch fish in northern Wisconsin full of eggs, that is a huge, huge, huge heavy fish for our area.
Yep.
So
Absolutely. Yeah, and another thing I kind of want to ask is like, what you're saying, where if they're in full spawn mode, they just don't want nothing to do with anything. If that's kind of the case, like you don't want to target maybe directly on the spots, or is it just like you cast there, hopefully they're hungry, and if they just are there and not hungry, you just know that they're doing the thing. Basically.
It kind of depends. I mean, I can't really say that I've had a ton of experience just casting at actively paired up spawning muskies. But just from
you don't want to do that.
The water a ton at that time, and just knowing, even growing up when you're a kid, of course you see a pair of muskies swimming by, like you're going to try and throw a Rapala at them or something. You know what I mean? When you're growing up, it's like I'm talking when you're like 15.
We've done it before.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
You remember that, Brian?
Right? And I guess for us, it would have been, I mean, the season, well, I guess technically the season would have been open because we never came up before Memorial Day weekend when I was younger. So I guess the season, it would have technically been open, but we've been up there and those fish were moving around. They were paired up. They were shallow, places like a Kentuck Lake or something where we're fishing bass, we're fishing panfish up shallow, and there's muskies laying all over the place up shallow. A shallow weedy lake like that, in those late years like that, and you cast at them and, they never really would respond. I'm not saying that you couldn't get one to do it. You could. But if I had my preference, I'm going to try to find the systems on that opener that are either the furthest away from the spawn in either direction. The fish that are furthest away from, like, hey, if the medium and small size lakes are just getting into the spawn, it's been a really, really cold year, and you're going to go hit something that's super big, deep, clear, and Cisco base, you might actually have a chance at getting the tail end of that window where those fish are actively feeding and like feeding in a real way, a real appreciable way prior to them entering that spawning phase where you could possibly get one of those super giants. And who knows, when you do finally get one to eat, it might be a 43, right? It doesn't, just because you catch one doesn't mean it'll be a 40 pounder. But again, it's a calculated risk. The other side of that coin is you're looking to go for the systems that are the furthest away from the spawn. In our neck of the woods, or in Wisconsin in particular, and probably anywhere that muskies swim, the stuff that's going to be furthest past is, of course, going to be the stuff you hear about all the time. Your shallow, your stained water lakes, but one that gets overlooked a lot are the river systems. Anything with a major tributary to it, especially that those fish can spawn weeks ahead of the natural lakes. And that can be for a number of reasons, but again, if it stays really cold, well, if you've got a lake that's got a bottom flow dam coming out, that water is going to be a lot more consistent. Well, if it's higher and everything's spawning earlier, well, then it's going to be, below the temperature of the surrounding lakes, and vice versa. But anyway, those river systems can really get it done. And also don't overlook, just because it doesn't have to be a river that you're fishing, just if that system has those river sections where those fish can go and get the job done and spawn, something like the Eagle Chain or something like that, where it's got those connective waters, and it's got areas they can run up, is being maybe one of the best examples. They can get it done really quickly before the other types of natural lakes around there, before those fish are able to. So look to two sides of the coin, the one being furthest from the spawn, on the post spawn being the ones where you're probably going to have the most active fish, the ones being the other way where you're trying to really catch one of those pre-spawn giants, because we just get very little time to target them when they're at their max body weight in the state of Wisconsin.
Real quick, we can get back to opener stuff, but I did want to ask you this question before I forget. So we're talking about kind of some maybe alternative ways to tackle musky opener, and one of the things, like I said, I was looking forward to asking you. So last year, reflecting back on the musky season, was there any sort of bites or any sort of things that surprised you last year? Like, for example, one thing for us that we've talked about is we were finding fish well into November that were sub 6 feet of water, sub 7-8 feet of water. Was there any sort of patterns or bites from last year that surprised you, or did things kind of play out as you had expected things to?
The bug hatch bite was a little better than normal, and those fish stayed off the break a little bit more. Not necessarily like true open water necessarily, just more that like a cast length or two off the break. That area stayed good for longer, I would say, than average, if that's maybe one thing. But I mean, it depends on the system, right? That's a great question, by the way. And that early fall, or even into late fall there, depending on what we get for temps, it was a relatively warm fall last year. So it's one of those things that doesn't get talked about very often, but it is a thing that happens. On multiple occasions up here, I've had some really good days on topwater, well into October. The biggest fish in my boat was about 7-8 years ago. I had a husband and wife. Lisa was the wife's name, and she caught a 47.5-inch, just absolute brick on a Dr. Evil. And that was like October 15th, I want to say. Wow. And again, it's well post turnover too. I think water temp was like, I want to say it was about 42, maybe 44, somewhere in there. It was a cold year. Wow. Yeah, it was like 40s. It was like 44 to 46, somewhere in there, I want to say. But that's, way past turnover, a time frame when most people wouldn't necessarily be looking for those fish shallow. But hey, man, if the fish are still coming up and we were still moving fish in those areas, and that was a good example of it. Like I said, it just happened to be on top water because the fish were sitting pretty skinny, but it was a prime time bite right at dusk, maybe half hour daylight left, and it was a really tough window, tough bite all day. Which in those tough days it always is. You get those narrow windows in the fall. That's something that's very much a thing. And that was it was moon, it was evening, it was a little bit of a power window, but we happened to find the right one at the right time. But top water bite and mid 40 degree water temps, and mid to late October. Might have been later than that. It might have been like October 18th, 20th. I don't know.
Wild.
But it was late, and it was even regardless of the calendar date, the water temps it was way past turnover. Turnover like 48 to low 50s, and there usually we get that upper 40s is about when it's usually like you can pretty much assume the system is post turnover, at least in our neck of the woods. But yeah, so that is one thing. It does happen, and I've actually seen them out in the bay too when I'm out duck hunting in the fall, just laying up very randomly, not necessarily in a targetable way, but coming in off plane in 3 feet of water in middle of November, and and it's like, oh shit, 48-inch musky laying there, just coming off of, it's all flat calm and gin clear. Then I've seen that on more than one occasion. Again, not to the point where I felt like I could go out there and actually catch them, but I have seen it probably about 4 times now. Once was twice in the same day. One of them was like a big one too, like a 52, real big. So, again, just to that point, they'll do weird things like that.
Yeah,
but,
that's cool.
Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned that you had a big bug hatch last year. Gus could probably talk about this better than I could, but at least the lakes we were on last year, we didn't have much of a bug hatch going on around us. So it just shows how different things can be so close. You know what I mean? That's what makes Northwoods so fun.
Yeah,
and
like maybe I
bug
just didn't go around much. I was just gonna say maybe I just wasn't going around too much because like the Eagle River chain, for example, bug hatch bite was not really going on.
Didn't happen out there.
much
Yeah,
at all
and it can
last
be
year.
system dependent,
No.
right? It can be system dependent. I'm not sure how it does seem to cycle. I really can't say it. I don't know the life cycle and timing on each of those individual species well enough to say for sure, but like it does seem that you'll get like 1 year, like almost like a mass crop with a tree, right? Where it's like every 5 years with an oak tree, you get a big mass. It's kind of the same with like bugs. You get this boom. We're like, man, the bug hatches are crazy out here this year. And then it seems to be other years, it wasn't so bad. And I don't know if that's just because it staggers out or if it is just a function of how their life cycle is and how those larvae are. I'm not sure.
I've heard of that actually.
I think it's a thing, but I can't say definitively. I'm spitting a little bit on that, but I know there's certainly other bug species that do that in both terrestrial and aquatic. So it wouldn't surprise me if some of those major, your mayflies and other stuff do the exact same thing.
Yeah, I think they do. I feel like I heard that talked about by Brad Hoppy on Backlash, who's been doing, open water trolling in Minnesota all the time. He talks about lakes over there and cycles for basically when an open water bite is good, and he's he is just referring to the bug hatch, entirely. And of course around here we got so many different options, and if I don't branch out to a lake that's got a bug hatch, I'm obviously going to say like, oh, hey, there's not much of a bug hatch going on. So
yeah, well,
just the
and
way
like
it
I said,
is.
it's one of those things where that was just one where and I'm speaking more on lakes that I know really well, that I've spent a ton of time on over the years, where it was just like those fish just seem to be off the break, because you go up and you hit the weeds and like, you're casting a shallow and the weeds look great. Everything was there. And it was just like, even like you had a couple of days where it got really juicy. It was really nice. It was like cloudy, nice muggy, like, oh dude, for sure. The top water bucktail bite's going to kick off today. We're going to crush them. And you go out and, fish through first moon of the day and like, maybe caught 135 or moved to 1 or 2. And it's just like, man, it just doesn't seem like, if those fish were there, I feel like I know they're eating somewhere. Like they're eating right now. I can feel it in my body. I know that they're eating. It's just that there wasn't a lot of them in those areas. And then you go off the break. It's like, okay, well, or have the best way I like to do it is we'll just have one guy. I often have, for sure it's always, 2 and, well, not always 2. I guess I do fish with just a customer plus myself. But a lot of times you get, 2-3 guys in the boat. It's not a big deal. Put 2 guys up front and have one guy casting the Canadian side, fishing off the break and casting out deeper, especially on those lakes where that happens a lot. And that guy over there was getting bit and moving fish a lot more frequently than and more consistently later into that June and into July than I have normally witnessed. So again, and who knows, maybe it's just a timing on my part too. Maybe I wasn't on that late, but anyway, like I said, that was the one thing I would say that stood out to me was those fish did stay off the break a little bit more, even though the conditions up shallow seemed to warrant, a lot of, it was perfect, right? Weeds were good. The bait's loaded in there. It cools down and it's like, they should be, or you get that juicy day and it just wasn't going for us. So it's a very poor topwater year, in other words, for me. We did get a few fish on it, but it's just one of those things where I didn't hit the days just right. At least that first half.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the topwater, and then that's weird. Personally, topwater was like the best for me, but that was just personal. As a boat
Well,
entirely,
it can be where you are too.
close
You
to
know,
on par, but
sure. Okay.
yeah,
Yep. So
yeah, and that's
again,
fishing shallow stay and stuff. So
yeah, totally. Oh, especially in places like the Eagle River chain that are just known. That's a great topwater system. I mean, the fish are
yeah,
smart. They have PhD, they know what's up, but
yep,
it's good topwater. It can be excellent topwater bite out there when the conditions are right.
yep, absolutely. Speaking of topwater, I mean, might as well if we're talking about opener talk. Rolling with the old topwater, it's something that you can just throw from opener to close, as they say.
Yeah.
What's kind of other than a prop bait? What's maybe another topwater you'd consider throwing on opener?
Great choice. That's a great question. I would say if I had to pick one, other than the prop bait, you got your globes, you got your tail baits, your top raider, your Dr. Evils, all that stuff. Of course, that's probably the most popular for sure. But I would say like a hog wobbler. The baby hog wobbler is a really great early season bait. Gets overlooked a lot. If you know you got some fish locked in an area, a quality creeper or something like that can be a great way to do it. The biggest thing for that, if you are throwing it, is just make sure you slow down. And that when you throw those kinds of baits, especially like a hog wobbler or something, you're pretty much forced to slow down. And if there is a top water presentation to be had, that's one of my favorites. Those fish sometimes will hold that in that super skinny water, and when they're holding that super skinny water in years where the weed growth is pretty advanced, by the time we get to that opener, um, there's just not a lot of baits you can throw to get at them a lot of times. And it can be maybe a prime time thing. It's not maybe something you do at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, no clouds and no wind, that kind of deal. But the conditions still have to be right for it. But that's an overlooked one for sure. And I've had action on that in that first week of the season. Never on opening day, but I have had good opening days on top water. It was probably about 6 or 7 years ago when we had a real early ice off and things were very advanced, and we were fishing a system that was very advanced. And it was it must have been it must have been Sunday evening. It was Sunday evening of opener. And I had one of the guys out. We do a little musky get together with some buddies, and we were out and we had 3 different fish blow up, and we boated a 39 or 37, something like that. And they were eating top water like it was the end of June, and they wouldn't touch anything else. We were throwing jerk baits, glide baits, everything else. And that prime time window was absolutely explosive for top water for us. And that was opening weekend. So it is a thing to look out for. But again, that's going to be the most advanced systems, in my opinion. Stuff that's the furthest ahead and past the spawn.
Brian's getting amped.
Yeah, that
Even wait, just talking about it's got me all cranked.
making my spine tingle. Yeah, yeah. I'm excited. Obviously, I'll throw the kitchen sink at him, but I'm curious.
Obviously,
Curious, kind of in your experience. I mean, we've talked to a lot of people on the pod about this, and kind of the answers are on both ends of the spectrum. But generally, it's like, oh, in the spring we're throwing smaller baits to start. Do you think there's some truth in throwing giant baits? Like, we'll have a boat of 3, 4 people, so like we could have one person throw a giant bait. Have you seen fish in the spring that maybe won't come unglued for a small bait, but that will, set free after a bigger bait?
100%. Absolutely. In 2012, when we had the really early ice off, that was one of the best. And I've told that story a number of times, but that was one of the best examples of that I've ever seen. Opening day, and I hooked 9 and landed 6. I broke my personal best twice that day. I had a 48 3/4 and a 49. And the 49 that I caught was still carrying egg weight. That was still one of the heaviest fish to this day that I've caught in northern Wisconsin. Another one of the fish I lost was a 4-foot class fish. And then I had a 46 1/4, I think. And then there was like a 43 or so and a 38 1/2, and then one small one.
Not a bad day.
Yeah, right. I didn't even get on the water till like
not bad.
One of those ones like, it's opening day. I mean, yeah, you get excited, but it's kind of, how it is. Like at the time, I look forward to opening day a lot more now. But then again, this is, 13 years ago now. But that was like one of the earliest ice offs we ever had. The ice was off in March, and the weed growth, things were basically on a mid-June program on opening day is basically what was going on there. But that was on China Medusas. Most of those fish came, I think 6 of those 9 bites were on China Medusas. And I ended up getting there because I started off, I think, with a regular bulldog. I was like, I'll just throw some rubber, see what's going on. It feels like it should be ready. And I boated a small one, and then that color bait got destroyed. I didn't have another one in that color. And I was like, I'll throw on a mag dog. That got destroyed. And I was like, well, and that was like the first couple of years we started throwing Medusas. I was when they first coming out and first showed up at, at the Muskie shop and stuff here was, I think, 2011. And we had thrown them that previous year for the championship down in Pewaukee. And it was one on that. I think Nate Osfar won that one, and they won it on on Medusas, and I know Mark Gillich, they were throwing Medusas. There's only a couple of us down there that were really throwing them, and we had, but that was when they had the bad harnesses too, way back in the day. And so we had lost a couple of fish, one or two fish. We had broken harnesses on like brand new baits. The front hook would break and split the harness and just come off in the tournament. And we did put one on the board. I think we took sixth place, and it paid out top 5. Of course, you know that goes. But anyway, but to that point, that was like when they had first come. So that really Super Magnum Medusa hadn't really been available. I think 2011 was the first year you could really buy them around here. It existed certainly in Minnesota for a year or 3 prior to that. But it hadn't made its way over here just yet. And it basically was one of those things, just kind of looked in the box like, give that a shot. I think it made 20 casts and drilled a 46. And it was like, oh, well, I guess they're eating it. And I mean, when I say like he ate it or she ate it, I mean, it was like choked, like just boom, complete like summer peak type inhale. I mean, mauled it. So that was, and then like I said, and that pattern just continued. The rest of the fish I caught that day were on that. Including, like I said, a 40, it was a 48 and a half or 48 3/4, and then a 49. So yes, right off the bat, rubber can be good. In fact, last year for us, we had on opening day, we boated 10 for the day, and we had, I want to say 3 of those fish. We had 3 or 4 bites for sure. I can't remember. I know we landed a 40. It was a 43 or 44. That was on a pit bull on opening day, and that was on a deeper lake. A deeper, larger, pretty advanced, a system that would be pretty late to spawn, but everything was kind of on cue last year. We weren't really still having a lot of spawning fish, as I recall. That was on a pit bull, and we had 2 or 3 other bites, and we might have landed one other one. I can't remember on the pit bull. And then everything else we had was on, your smaller gliders, your jerk baits. And then I did get, the one I got on a fly that evening. So it was kind of the outlier of the group. But as far as like eating those bigger baits, certainly anything up to that regular bulldog pit bull size, mid Medusa is very much going to be on the table again for this year. I think we're going to be well into that time frame, and you can go bigger if you feel is necessary, if the conditions warrant, if it's really good.
Did you, if I remember correctly, did you catch that fish on the fly at night?
I did, right at dusk, yeah, like in the dark, like headlamp dark. Yeah, oh, dude, it was like right at the end. That was, I mean, I've caught a lot of muskies, but that one, I don't know if I'll ever. That fish was. That was one of the best catches of my career, man.
Did you break it out again through the year?
So I did, but I ended up breaking my rod, which was like, I don't know what happened. It was like a defect. I know. And by the time I got it built and they did it. It was something was in the blank. It broke at one of the ferrules. I went and did I actually did a trip with Haas, with Nick Gellerstadt from Musky Fool. He runs a bunch of their guide trips through Musky Fool.
Oh yeah.
I did a trip swap with him. So he's like, we talked at the shows, and he's like, hey man, you want to do a trip swap? Because I was talking about fly fishing and picked their brain. And Dan and Haas and Gabe over there, they're all fantastic, just helping me. I'd done some fly fishing. I mean, I guide for steelhead. I know my way around a fly rod. I don't do a ton of fly fishing here, but I know enough about it. I get enough clients that want to do it. I know what I'm doing to a point, but certainly not for muskies, and certainly not like modern day. So I talked to those guys, and they were excellent at getting me set up there. Kramer he's built a number of really nice fly rods there. He built me a really great, it was amazing. I loved it. I got it sitting, I'm looking at it right now, and it's sitting right next to the boat here. But it was really cool. But I did that trip with him. Anyway, I was getting out with that as I did that trip with him in June there, and it was right at the end of the trip. It was just it broke when I was loading. It was on a load. I don't know what happened to it. So anyway, but by the time he was so slammed with building rods, by the time I got it back, it was September, and I just didn't get a chance to really do it much more, but it's definitely on my list for this year.
So, sure. I mean, that's awesome. So speaking of, catching it at dusk or during the night, something we might tool around with this year is doing a little bit of night fishing during opener. Have you ever experimented with doing some more nighttime stuff early season? Like, I don't know if it really kind of goes hand in hand but we were going to give it a shot potentially. Just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
On the right system, yes. In fact, it's been a while now, but we used to come up every weekend for Memorial Day weekend with my family. I grew up fishing in Eagle River area there. That's where I came up since I was 5 years old. And that's kind of what acquainted me with the Northwoods. And I always wanted to live up here, and found my way through forestry up here after college, and then started guiding right thereafter. And that's how I got to where I am here. But we'd come up every Memorial Day weekend. So we'd be here for Northern Muskie opener. And of course, the Meps number 5 and small crankbaits, shad wraps, that kind of stuff usually produce a muskier for us. And we had one year, in particular where I remember like we had nobody caught any muskies. Like we fished a lot of other stuff, right? There was always crappies and walleyes. We were always after that stuff. Maybe go get some bass if they were on the beds, or if we felt like it for a few hours. We never really did a ton of bass, but if they're available, we'd go for them. And then of course we'd spend some time casting for muskies, but more with just like I said, heavy duty spinning rods, maybe your average 7.5 foot, 8 foot, whatever we had at the time for a small bucktail or something. But we did have one in particular where I used to go out and shine a bunch at night on the lake I was on there. I'd go out in the rowboat, or we'd go out after we were done, walleye fishing or something for the night, and we'd just like shine when we were going in because we were kids, 10, 12, 14-year-old kids with flashlights looking in the water, and you start seeing, oh, there's bluegills, there's crappies, there's suckers, there's walleyes, there's muskies, and that was always like a pretty cool thing. And notice that a lot of these fish would be hanging around, especially if the sucker spawn is going. That can be a really good place and a really good time to target those fish. I mean, if you did it watching it and stuff, when you guys were looking through the videos on there's a whole section on that sucker spawn, and a lot of it comes from those experiences growing up, and then stuff that I put into practice certainly in my career and later on. But that could be an area where those fish stack up there. It's almost similar to like the Cisco spawn in the fall. If you can find an area like that where they're stacked up, and like I went out and caught them at night is what I'm getting to. Long way of telling you the short answer. But we went out there. I got a 44-incher. It was on it actually might have been on a baby hog wobber, baby fire tiger hog wobber. I think it was because they were sitting up pretty shallow. The suckers, when they spawn, at least on this lake, their backs are out in most lakes probably, but their backs can be like right up out of the water. They go right up tight to the bank, just like the walleyes do a lot of times. And they're like, you can hear them up there making their little splashes, just like they do in the river in the spring. In the steely run and stuff where they're shimmering like that. They do their little vibration when they're doing their thing. They're all wadded up there, and it was calm. And you just all of a sudden you hear we were out walleye fishing is how we stumbled into it, and all of a sudden you just hear whoosh, like one just come up and just get pounded, I mean, and it's flat calm. It's not like nobody's out there throwing basketballs in the water, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
What the hell is that about, right? So when we were done, we caught a couple of walleyes, whatever, and then we had shined through along. There's an island out there. We looked along there, and there's one little point that sticks out. We saw there was like 15, 16 muskies that were all kind of hanging out there outside all those suckers just over the course of that big long stretch of shoreline.
Wow.
And so I went back the next night and cast it at them just to see. The conditions were so good. It was kind of muggy and nice. It was, again, you had like good conditions for it. It's not like you're out there and it's 31 degrees and crap or something. Then it's going to be tough no matter what, probably. But to that point, yeah, no, they will eat after dark. It's definitely not a only midsummer pattern. In fact, in the fall in particular, it's probably one of the most overlooked patterns by the majority of fishermen, certainly in like the month of September. I think a lot of people kind of correlate that night bite with summer heat, which is right. It's correct. Usually about that mid-July, it gets going pretty good, especially if you got good weather during the day and those fish just don't seem to want to move. Usually there's a pretty good night bite going. It can probably also be true, I would think, and in the same way in the spring, right? You've got pretty good conditions. Things aren't going your way, and you're like, man, these fish should be doing more than they are. And then when they do show up, they're super lazy. That can be an indicator to you that they are feeding at another time. And after dark's a great time to check on that.
Okay. I'm just curious because we got some this year for opener actually coincides with a pretty damn good moon, and some of those windows are a little bit later on in the evening. So
give it a shot, man. Yeah, it's worth a shot. I mean, there's nothing. It's hard to get through that mental wall, right? Especially when there's so much information out there these days that we've all, there's always like the industry standard of what we think we know or what, but whenever you get outside of that, you don't really hear a lot of people reinforce those things. And that is one of those things where I feel pretty strongly that yes. And again, the weather should be good, right? You want it to be a situation where you're not really depending on that water to get up to a warmer temperature during the day where those fish might respond positively. You want these fish to be well past the spawn. And I guess maybe they eat after dark and during the spawn. That I don't know. I've never really targeted them during the spawn at night. Maybe they do, especially on a warm night when they're all laying up shallow, just waiting or they are actively spawning. They do spawn at night. They're up there. If you go around and shine during the musky spawn at night, or put a light in the water, you'll see them. We used to splash around by our dock and stuff down there too. You'd hear them. Like they were just messing around, doing musky things, So why wouldn't they bite, right? It's a possibility.
Interesting. Yeah. I appreciate you answering that because we'll see how it goes. I mean, we're really looking forward to opener here. I mean, I know we were lucky enough to get down to Kentucky and do a little bit of fishing, but I always love like that first weekend in northern Wisconsin. It's just the best. So,
There's a big difference between going and
Hard to beat.
grinding out the system where you're fishing next to porta potties and stuff. And,
It's a little nicer than
and
that.
it's a cool system, but it's a brutal. It's been that way for, like I said, when we fished tournaments back in 2009, 10, 11, in that time frame. It was the same stories from the guys down there. It was like some years it was pretty sweet, and other years it was just like,
whoa, this is gonna be tough.
Whoa, man.
All right,
What are we doing down here?
So speaking of tournaments, kids are getting a little older.
Yeah.
When are you making the return back to whatever trail is going to exist when you make your return inevitably?
I don't know, man. Like I said, I got one agreement with an individual that if it comes to a certain water here or there, that we'll get on it and maybe fish the trail or something. But we'll see. My kids are about to be 7, just turned 4 and 1.5. So I mean, every minute I can spend when I'm not, and I travel a lot for work. I'm on Green Bay for Muskies, Green Bay for ducks, I'm gone for steelhead. And I've mixed in a couple other travel trips here, professionally and mostly professionally, but somewhat personally too. Like it kind of marries together. You're building those relationships with folks in the hunting or fishing industry there. And I've got to do a lot of great stuff, and I just don't want to push it too far, right?
I get you.
I've already gone a lot, so. But I would like to. I mean, the PMTT. I mean, if everything's still, in good shape there, and numbers are still being drawn, it's still worth it financially to go do. I mean, it's something I would certainly not be super opposed to, but. I miss it, man. The tournaments were fun. I like it. It was good. The tournament, you guys can relate. There's no sweeter smell,
Nothing
no
better
sweeter
now.
rush than a 35-incher in a tournament. Yeah, baby. You never prayed for a 34 or a 31 or a 30 and a quarter so hard in all your life, and you finally get one, especially when it's just a garbage day.
Yeah, I know.
And it's not a shootout, dude. It's like I just need one bite. And we fished some of those tournaments, man. Back in the day, we had back-to-back tournaments where we lost, and other people lost fish too, but where we thought we had it in the bag. In both those tournaments, nobody caught a fish. And it's like, dude, dump a 41 touching the net. We're just like, oh, or lose one tournament we lost 3 of them. One was on Buenos Aires, and one was on Okachi for back in the WMT days, the Wisconsin Tour, and those are back-to-back weekends. They used to have, they have the Okachi and you have Pewaukee the one day Saturday, and then Sunday would be Okachi, and the following weekend was Buenos Aires on Saturday and North Twin on Monday or Sunday. I think.
No shit, that's sick. What was the Buenos Aires tournament? What was the Buenos Aires tournament like?
That was it. Yep. So that was what's that?
What was it like? I mean, I'm always curious to hear about what that was.
Amazing. Full field was 75, and they were full. There was a waiting list, 100%.
Wow.
It was, and that was then
those
years leading up to. We got in at the tail end of that. That was, like I said, that 04, I would say, through 08 was probably the height of that. When Mark Lejeski won that Triple Crown, that would have been 2008 because it was the year before we started fishing it. They won a 1-day event, a 2-day event, and the championship. I remember the championship that year was on Big St. Germain, and they went out there and they doubled both days because it was a transport tournament. So you could only 2 fish. You register 2 fish, and after that, you're done. You can't catch 5 fish. You can't because you technically transport them back to the dock, right? So that was all tournaments were basically transport at that point, or PMTT did judge boats. Where they just have judge boats in sectors, kind of like how the Spring Classic used to. I don't know if that was before your time or not. When they were still doing that, you guys kind of came in probably at the tail end of that, if you saw it at all. But so anyway, long story short, that was about the peak of that tournament. That tournament series for a time, man, that was it. And I still have, lifelong friendships that I made with people that I met on that tournament trail. And I see a lot of these guys were just, now I don't get to see them or talk to them that much, but I bump into them at a Muskie show and they come up and they're still on my phone as, so-and-so WMT, back when I had a Kia Sarah, before even a flip phone, right? The little,
no Kia.
With that name, where it's hilarious that it's already, like I said, 15, 16 years later here that, time, it feels like a million years ago, but it feels like last week at the same time. But that tournament, it was a good setup. I mean, like I said, there was some things that happened with it that just kind of went down the tubes, and it is what it is. But it was a shame to see it go that route, right? The same shame to see the support wane for it in the actual trail to go away. But the events themselves and the community that it bred and the camaraderie of the guys and the tightness of the dudes there. Because it was a trail, like it was in Wisconsin trails. I figured it had to be at least 12 or 14 tournament trail in Wisconsin.
Wow.
And it'd be like 2 a weekend. And it'd be, or it'd be a 2 day. Yeah. It would be like, they always had like a 2-dayer on the Phillips, or there was like one, I think it was like 1 day on the Phillips chain, and then another day on Butternut was the one weekend. And then the other one was there'd be like North Twin, and then View to Zare was 1 week, and the Pewaukee and Okachi was one, and then they'd have North Twin, or not North Twin. Eagle River chain was of course a 2-dayer. Mantua chain was a 2-dayer. Three Lakes chain was a 2-dayer. They had Boom Lake in there. They had a lot of great systems, man. And it was just like I said, it was probably the pinnacle of the sport at the time for tournaments in our neck of the woods for sure.
That's awesome.
So,
yeah,
and then
we're late to the game.
Yeah,
Peak
it was. Like I said, we
fishing.
got in at the tail end, and it was like that for a year or two, and then things kind of went off the rails there. It just kind of faded by the wayside for, depending on who you ask. But that's neither here nor there. The fact that it was there and it was awesome was pretty cool. But I mean, our first tournament we fished was North Twin. It was we got into it because I've been fishing North Twin for a long time, and it's that weekend, it's opening weekend, and that was one of the places we'd go and just throw small spinners and stuff and try to catch them, opening weekend up there when I was younger, just with my dad. I didn't know, basically it's all shallow fishing. You have basic depth on your graph. Like there was no GPS on graphs. It didn't even exist then. If you can wrap your head around that, like all these dudes are out fishing tournaments and like crushing, and it was like nobody even had GPS yet. Or it was like just came out. Like that was it.
Ripping 2D.
Sonar, all this other stuff. Like nothing was even, side imaging was barely even like a concept. And all of a sudden it's like, and I'll never forget, this was like a couple years later after everybody had gotten this, probably about that, 2011, 2012, everybody kind of has GPS and side imaging, the first run of the Humminbird side imaging, which was the best they had at the time. This is back, before the Onyx series even and all that, just the old, like whatever it was, a 597 or whatever the heck in an 889 or whatever the models were. And I remember Neil Barnett, who was a hammer, still is. He's one of the better musky fishermen up in this neck of the woods. He's just an absolute stick. And he's like, yeah, I'm thinking about buying a GPS this year. And it's like, what? He's been crushing everybody.
No
Doesn't have a GPS on his phone. Just a fishy dude that understood, big rubber ripper, and always just crushing on that program and knowing where to be and when to be there. And it was just amazing that then even just those couple years after, to think about like some dude who's like placing, doing like their team of the year that you do for PNTT, the team of the year for that as well. But this is over the course of, again, like I said, probably 14 tournaments, or at least a dozen. It was a lot. It was every weekend for pretty much everything except the peak summer.
Nuts.
Yeah, all the way in, and then the championship would always be like the end of September, early October.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and that rotated around as well. But yeah, it was, but just, you think about how times have changed. That's a 15-year span, and it's amazing to think how crazy things, like we talk about it a fair bit, but just whether it be the rods, the reels, but just the electronics and everything, it's staggering, honestly.
Yeah.
It
is. Oh man, that's so cool. Yeah, maybe Wisconsin will see another trail system one of these days. Who knows?
I'd love to get back out and do it. Like I said, it'd be cool. I know a number of the guys, even from the WMT, we talked about like, oh, dude, you should start one. You could, make that work. But it's just, honestly, it's one of those things. And two, I think tournament directors, it's a hard gig, man. Like, because when you really look at it, and then you see the people that complain too, and there's a line to be said. I'm not sticking up for anybody. There's definitely some things that happen that have no justification, whether it's, whatever it is. We won't go there. But when you're trying to run a tournament like that, whether it's a bass or a muskie or walleye or whatever, like at the end of the day, it takes a lot to put all that together. And, I don't think I could really justify giving up my time and setting it all up and not take enough money that people would probably complain about it. Right. Because you got to cover your time, right? It's got to be something where you unless you're doing it for a charity or something like that, which is also certainly an admirable thing. And maybe at some point when I got a few more free hours, it's something that happens. But, it's one of those things where we've got some tournaments around and enough to get guys' hands wet and get their feet dirty in it. But to see something like that come back and actually succeed would be really nice.
Yeah. It's something we've definitely talked about in the past. So, I mean, it's, we'll see how it goes. Cause right now it feels like, the PMTT is the only show in town and we've really enjoyed doing it. But yeah, who knows what the tournament landscape looks like. I mean, I don't know. I guess you gotta you'd have to ask around and see, I guess, what the appetite for it would be. And, I think right now people are very conscious of status of our fisheries. So who knows if that would get pushed back, if they were doing tournaments, quite frequently, who knows? But yeah, it would be cool. I love tournament
It's
fishing
something
for
you guys
muskies.
I think it's something that would be doable. You know what I mean? It's just one of those things where, at the end of the day, it's a lot like guiding or anything else. I mean, you forget about you get passionate about it and you do it and you love it, but at the end of the day, it has to be run like a business. And if you're not running it like a business, you're going to have a really hard time. You know what I mean? Whether that's financially, emotionally, mentally, just all the above. You need to have something there because it needs to have money in the coffers, and you can't steal from that, right? When the money goes in there, it has to be allocated for a certain thing, or for whether it's it's no different than running any business, right? You can't own a restaurant and drink the profits, right? You got to reinvest. Right. Sometimes it needs a new roof, it needs a this, it needs a that. You need to keep putting stuff back in to grow and advertise and take good care of the guys who are coming to that tournament, because guys like you and Gus going to fish a tournament, you guys are the customer, and the people that run tournaments would do well to realize that if you are running a tournament, the people signing up for your tournament are your customers, and you should be doing everything you can to make it fair and honest and above all, just above board and transparent for those folks, whether that be rules, whether that be payouts. And that was one of the things that really drove that under back in the day. I mean, it was, you'd show up for a tournament and there was less than a certain number of guys and they'd voted on it. This was towards the end of that run of like the WMT stuff. There was, we show up to fish a tournament that we didn't fish the day before. We're going to fish only the Sunday tournament, not the Saturday tournament. You go there, you take third place, and they're like, "Oh, we voted last night to only pay top two." It's like, well, when I sent in my payout, my pay-in, when I sent in my $500 entrance fee 6 months ago, you know what I mean? Like, what are we doing? You know what I mean? It's one of those things where, and I get it, like that would be one thing, but again, there was no transparency. It's not like they contacted everybody on the list. And now, again, look at what was available technologically. You didn't have the reach that you could do now, where hey, just put everybody in a group and be like, look, here's the deal. You know what I mean? You'd have a lot better chance at coordinating that now. But sure, when you put something in a tournament, I guess the long and the short of it, I've learned a couple things from tournaments where if you guys ever do it, feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to give you some input. But just in general, those cardinal rules that just can't be broken is, be transparent about what you're taking from a tournament. If it's 20%, it's 20%. Put it all on paper. Everybody's gonna be able to do the math of 50 dudes signed up or 50 teams signed up at X amount of dollars. That's this amount of dollars. And the tournament payout should add up to X amount of dollars, less whatever is being taken for administrative fees or wages for the person running the tournament. Like those numbers need to add up with a zero discrepancy all the time.
Yeah.
The other thing is too, when the rule is put on paper, it has to stay concrete. There was another incident, where one we had, and not to get too far into this, but there's a lot of great stories on, but there's one where a guy was fishing by himself. His partner couldn't make it, but he was dragging a rod off the back of the boat. So it's like, well, you're dragging a rod off the back of the boat going along at 2 miles an hour, which, I mean, hey, if it's legal, I guess go for it. It's 2 lines, but you can't drag a bulldog and then be casting going 3 miles an hour down the brake line. You're basically trolling bait and casting another. And he did catch a fish in the tournament, and thankfully it wasn't one where it was like, oh, dude, this dude took first place, right? So it wasn't, the complaints were made. People were like, hey, man, this is kind of bullshit, right? But it wasn't, it never made any difference because financially it wouldn't have mattered. But, stuff like that, like, look, man, if it's 1 line per person, and, the tournament director kind of dismissed it. He was like, well, it's like, well, no, not, well, like, that's not, you can't do that. You can't do that, So,
we might have to get you on again and just do a full podcast about tournaments, like old WMT stories and everything like that.
Yeah.
Maybe bring on like an old partner of yours or like something like that. I think that'd be fun. I know we did a pretty, yeah. I know we're I know we would have a lot of fun doing that. So I don't know if Gus or Brian has any ending questions here to wrap us up. I know I don't want to. I want to be respectful of your time, JVR. Gus, what do you got?
Yeah, all good, man. Yep, good.
I got one, just kind of last thing. See what you got here. I know you said you maybe did some traveling last summer or last year a little bit. Any big plans this year that you're able to share at all?
Yeah, this year, not too much. I'll spend my time on Green Bay. I'll get a couple days in down there. I'll get my time in there, and that's going to be, and then mostly just for work this year. Last year we did Did a trip. I did go to Eagle Lake for a couple days with a customer of mine. He won a trip up there and was generous enough to say, "Hey man, you want to hop in?" And I just so happened that the days worked for me. Like my calendar, I had a group that had like 2 or 3 days of that week locked up, and they backed out or they had something come up that they couldn't make. It was months in advance, whatever. Just so happened to work out. I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll go. Whatever. I couldn't really pass it up. And it was a lot of fun. That was like a 3-day. I think we were there like 3 days. And then of course I went up and did Alaska last year for a hunt for king eiders. That was a pretty cool time. That was neat.
Wow.
But that was kind of the big one. That was I mean, that's a relatively pricey hunt. If you're a duck hunter, that's the hardest species to get. And in my world is full-time. Well, full-time is full-time when the season's going, I guess. But as a full-time duck guide, that's was kind of a pinnacle. I didn't want to do it when I was like 50, right? Like I want to get it out of the way. It's one of those things where it's the Bering Sea. It's January. It's not probably going to be nice. You don't really know what you're going to get into a super small boat in this tiny little thing in the middle of the Bering Sea. And it was one of those. That was like a high trip for me. So that I kind of burned up all my credits on that one last year. So, and it went great. It was awesome. It was a good trip, and the group of guys are very memorable. But yeah, so this year I don't have anything. I pretty much just calendar's full for guide dates, and this year I'm not doing anything crazy. But next year I'd like to get back up to Lake of the Woods for at least a 3, 4, or 5 day period. Lake of the Woods I'd like to get back to, possibly Eagle or a Loch Sewell trip. I got a couple different groups of guys that we've talked about that a number of times, and I'd like to get up and actually put in a full trip up there and go do some of that. Or maybe even go out, and do something totally different. Go out like French River or the Larry or something like that. I'd like to go and travel, do something like that. But I just haven't been able to squeeze in the schedule just yet. How about you guys? Any travel plans this year?
Same boat as you.
Yeah.
Been talking about
Not
Canada,
much.
maybe next year, and we haven't put our foot down. So
No,
Sure.
it's PMTT this year for us.
Yeah, well, and that's just it. The PMTT, it starts to eat into your time for that. And it's cool because you are traveling. And I mean, I think tournaments, I will be the first to tell you that I would not be where I am as an angler today without that base to build on. Like tournament fishing really forces you to understand that you can get your butt kicked no matter how confident you are. And you can also always find a bite. There's always a hungry fish in those systems. And what you just got to be the guy that finds it. And you learn also by watching people, the guys that are those super consistent dudes out there, your Mark Lejeski's or whoever the guy is that's all, or you guys, for example, now, I mean, you guys have put fish in the boat over and over and over, whether it's one of those things where you just feel like you did it and got lucky, or there's a lot more to it than that though, right? Like sometimes you do feel and you're like, man, well, I was lucky, got one bite in 2 days and we had nothing going pre-fishing. We've all been there. If you fish enough tournaments, you've been there where you just don't have that confidence and you still somehow, dude, you squeaked it out. That's all that matters. But I think that tournament grind, I mean, and then forcing you to go to places like a cave run and fish it at whatever water level it's at, or go to some lake in Minnesota that's huge that you don't know. And you got to put in your time and just adapt. I mean, you learn a lot of things from a lot of different places that it's just really no other way that you will be forced to fish that hard and that aggressively and be in that level of company and level of competition. There's just nothing else out there that puts you at that level and gets you to fish that hard.
Agreed.
I fully agree there. Honestly, yeah, we push tournaments pretty hard. Honestly, we completely agree with everything you just said and how it's gotten us to where we are and taught us to be the musky anglers that we are today. Absolutely. I mean, nothing makes you learn a place faster than a tournament. I mean,
Great.
just
And
being there for 4 or 5
when you don't
days.
win, like learning what was the thing, because it's always about the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
I think people really go, into it if you're going into it to be like, I got to cash a check, I got to do it. Yeah, that's great, man. But like, if you think you're going to tournament musky fish and pay the bills, it's nice to
That's
take home a
not it.
check, but it's not. Yeah, if first place was $100,000, okay, a little different, but it's just not that way. By the time you add up all your expenses and your travel, yeah, you can make some money doing it, but it is one of those things where it is a love of the game thing, and it's bettering yourself, growing your name or your brand. If you're in a situation like yourself as a young musky guide coming up, it's something that it gets you, and you're making those network connections with a lot of good people, whether that be just bait makers, other tournament fishermen, whatever the case is. That's super key.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it can't replace the relationships that we've gotten just in 3 years now with the PMTT. So, I mean,
Yeah, 100%.
absolutely love it.
Yep.
Absolutely love it. Anything else do you want to add, Brian? I think I answered, or you answered the question I had.
No, I think we covered a lot. That was good stuff. Yeah, I agree with Max. So we should definitely get you on for full tournament recap. Going back
Yeah,
to the
well, I
years
can
we
remember
did.
anyway. You know, it was a long time ago, but yeah, man, there was some funny. It's like, and I'm sure a lot of it. You know, I think there's probably something to be said for like only the faces have changed. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
It's not
yeah,
saying like, oh, son of a gun, that guy over there, he cut me off. You get a lot of that stuff, but
Yeah.
you know, I mean, once you get past that, like it's like, well, welcome to tournament fishing, right? Like, you know, like all
yeah.
people know that main lake weed point is probably a spot a muskie lives, right? Like it is. You know,
Yeah.
but there
Yep.
is certainly some of those ones, stories you can tell, and other ones you probably can't or shouldn't. But yeah,
Well,
there's
those are the
some,
ones we want. Those are the ones
right?
we can
Yeah, there
save
you
for
go.
next time. Well, look, we appreciate you coming on tonight. Sounds like you had a hectic day, so thank you for making the
Oh
time.
man, it's all good, man. I appreciate you having me
Thank
here.
you.
Like I said, hopefully help some folks out going into the muskie season this year. Good luck to everybody in 2025.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Sounds
You bet.
good. Thanks, JVR.